Afghanistan had a socialist government. The United States intervened, propped up the Taliban, invented them as a way to fight back against Russia. We thought we were going to have a big own on Russia. And now the Taliban, who, by the way, we're working with. Right.
Okay, so that's a different point. So, okay, I've heard this for years. America created the Taliban.
Right.
And they had a socialist, a perfect socialist government beforehand. Okay, so I did some preliminary research, some very basic Googling, because I was curious about.
I'm so curious right now. I just read a book on this, but nowhere in the book does it mention that Afghanistan. No one was virtue signaling for Afghanistan about what a great socialist country it was.
Oh, you mean you read the Communism, the Light Never Dies book?
Yes.
Yes, right. So I looked this up, and apparently after World War II, both the U.S. and the USSR were funneling money into Afghanistan to help them build infrastructure, because both countries were kind of vying for the government's loyalty at the time. And then in I'm trying to remember, it was like the 60s or 70s, sometime around that time period, the Communist Party stages a coup in Afghanistan.
Right. We were funding the Taliban to fight against the Soviets.
Hold on. We're not even there yet. We're not even there yet. Okay. So this is Taliban doesn't exist. This is, both the US, USSR giving money to Afghanistan government to build infrastructure projects.
After World War II.
After World War II.
Right. Because we all want to have bases over there. Like Russia wants a base there. We want a base there. So we're competing for that.
Yes. And it's not Russia. It's the USSR, Soviet Union.
Right.
Okay.
Before the collapse.
Right. And so the Communist Party takes over via a coup. They were not voted into power. The people did not elect to have them. They took over with force. Okay. They took over with force.
Oh my God, this is hilarious.
Okay. But wait, it gets even worse. Okay. The guy who's in charge of the Communist Party ends up being assassinated by his second in command.
Always how it goes.
And it was only after a year or something. Very short time. Then, after he's assassinated, the second guy in charge, whose name is Amin, the Soviet Union is afraid that he is going to start supporting. He's going to switch sides
to the U.S.
A U.S. supporter. So what does the Soviet Union do? They invade the country.
My God! So this is where the war comes in.
So this is the great communist government of Afghanistan. Okay, this all happens in the span of 2 years.
So the USSR invades.
Yeah. So the USSR invades the country.
Right.
Out of fear that they're going to switch loyalty to the U.S. and kills the guy and replaces him with a Soviet loyalist.
Oh my God! So that's number 3 commie is a Soviet loyalist.
Right.
Okay.
So this is the magical, amazing socialist government. This is the problem. Jimmy has this incredibly moronic, simplistic worldview that the U.S. government is just walking around going, if the socialist government is anywhere in the world, we have to stamp it out. It's no, it's actually a very complicated series of events that happened, because you have the USSR literally just invades Afghanistan because they're afraid that they're going to become more sympathetic to America.
But go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, so this is how I just remember, and I can't remember where it's from a documentary or whatever, but I remember the Secretary of State said, this is our opportunity to give the Russians Vietnam, to do the exact inverse of what they did to us in Vietnam. If we funnel money to the Taliban or to, I don't know if they were calling them the Taliban at the time, we're basically funding the resistance force that's fighting against who's fighting against the Soviet Union. So we did that. In Vietnam, the Soviets were the ones that were funding the Khmer Rouge, I believe. That's the the resistance against us in Vietnam. So
Soviets and China were both helping the communists in Vietnam. Yes.
So we we were basically having a proxy war. None of the American citizens knew about this in Afghanistan. And I believe the Soviets were there for 10 years or something.
Yeah, they were there for, I don't remember the exact year, but they were there for a long time. And yeah, that's exactly it. So after the USSR invades Afghanistan, the U.S. government's like, hey, let's mire them down in a quagmire the way they mired us down in Vietnam. And so they start sending money to the Mujahideen, who, well, before we get
fighting
to
the great
Mujahideen,
Soviets, just the context of this is hilarious.
Right. But
Jimmy Dore says this is a perfect socialist government there.
Right. That's the picture he's sort of painting. And it's funny because America and capitalism always gets hit with like this, they're like the colonizing oppressors. It's like, okay, the USSR was going all over the world, snatching up and trying to colonize as many places as remotely possible.
They held on to East Berlin for fucking decades.
Yes, and Afghanistan is just another example of them literally colonizing.
Yeah,
and because they're afraid that the country's going to go and be supportive of the
Why
US.
don't they get any colonizing flap? What's up with that?
According to Wikipedia, okay, half of all villages in Afghanistan were destroyed by the Soviets and the Communist Party.
Oh my God.
Half. Can you fucking imagine that?
Wow.
Half of every village destroyed.
Yeah.
By the Soviet army and the Communist Party.
Just think of the city next door to you. That's gone.
Just gone, right? And if you want to talk about morality too, and this was a big problem, the USSR would often come into these countries and they would just litter the place with mines.
And
they would not keep records of where they put the mines. So after the war, well, you're just fucked because they're just out there somewhere waiting for people to pick them up. And there was a big problem in Afghanistan because for whatever reason, they were using these brightly colored mines that would stand out in the sand. And lots of times kids would like pick them up because they thought it was like a plastic toy or something and they'd blow their heads off.
I think I saw a TED talk on that. There was a guy who was trying to figure out a way to detonate all the old mines in Afghanistan, which, can you imagine?
It's a huge problem. But no, look, there's no moral difference between the USSR and America. Okay. It's the same thing, right? There's no difference, Jimmy Dore. It's the same thing.
Of course. Yeah.
Right. Oh, so the thing, and so I looked up this claim about like, the U.S. created the Taliban. Where does this come from? This comes from the fact that the U.S. funded a bunch of people who all joined forces. Like there's like 4 or 5 different factions that all kind of came together to form the Mujahideen rebel fighters against the USSR and the Communist Party in Afghanistan. And according to a Vox article, the right-wing publication Vox, they said that the majority of Mujahideen fighters were not Islamic extremists, but were just normal people fighting off Soviet invaders.
Which you would. I mean, if all your friends and family got annihilated in the town next door, I'm going to war. Fucking give me a rocket launcher.
Yep. And so basically what happened was the U.S. gave a bunch of money to the Mujahideen. After the war, unfortunately, as usually what happens, the most extreme elements of the Mujahideen, who were the Islamic crazy people, ended up being the most motivated to seize power, and thus they did, and they created the Taliban.
Which always happens, It's always the psychopaths that are like, well, I'm just going to stay in power here.
Right.
Yeah.
This is like, if you've seen Charlie Wilson's War, which is a great movie, which is all about Charlie Wilson trying to start funding the Mujahideen. After the war, he was trying to get a lot of money allocated to rebuild the country, and the U.S. was basically like, go fuck yourself. We don't care. That's not sexy.
Tom Hanks movie, right?
That. Yes, Tom Hanks movie. Very good movie.
My voters want us to stick it to the Russians. They don't care about rebuilding Afghanistan.
Right, exactly.
Which is sad. Totally fucking sad.
But that creates, the perfect environment for extremist groups to come about.
For a power vacuum that's going to cause September 11th, 20 years later. Yeah, no, it fucking sucks. It's totally stupid. Charlie Wilson could have solved all this.
So does America have responsibility in the creation of Taliban? Sure, definitely. But is it as simple as saying, they created the Taliban to fight the Soviets? No, they didn't. There was no intention to create an Islamic religious group to fight off the Soviets. Okay, that was never intended, and that's not even what happened. Okay, it was what happened incidentally. It was no one's intention.
It's so fucking sad that we didn't. that we didn't, because that's the perfect time to nation build. We literally united 5 factions together against the Soviets. Like, nothing is going to solidify people stronger than a foreign power coming in and decimating half of your cities and then you fighting them off.
They just want to know which team everybody's on.
Yes.
For sure. They don't like it when it's like unclear.
Yeah, that's another thing that we have in common with you, Shu, because we don't want to be on a fucking team.
Amen, brother.
We're rebels.
What are we, some kind of suicide squad?
Good night, everybody. Da, 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 da.